Hello and welcome to the Tennessee Informer. I'm your host, Dave Vance. Thank you for joining us tonight. Our special guest tonight is State Representative Rusty Grills. But first, it's time for announcements and updates. The Knox for Liberty Freedom Fest celebrating faith, family, and freedom will be held Saturday, August 19th, 2023 from 5 to 10 p.m. Creekside. It's 6729 Malone Creek Road, Knoxville. Join us for a fun-filled evening of inspiring speakers, music, patriot groups, and vendors, and a great selection of food and drink. Purchase your tickets now at knoxforliberty.org/freedomfest. Event lineup, it features Brad Stein, God's comic actor, writer, and apologist, Ken Peters, pastor and founder of Patriot Church, Nicole Hirschberger, Tennessee Regional Manager, TPUSA Faith, Andrea Gomez, Tennessee State Director for Citizens for Renewing America, Bernadette Pager, leader of Tennessee Chapter of Children's Health Defense, Maria Wagner, Executive Support Manager, Moms for Liberty, Brian Ritchie, Tennessee State Representative, Justin Lafferty, Tennessee State Representative, Nate Dressel, former Green Beret, owner of Frontier Coffee, Jeff Cobble, constitutional attorney, Cobble Law Firm, Willie Franklin, a singer and songwriter. Booth and sponsorship opportunities are still available. Email chair@knoxforliberty.org for more information. Karen Bracken, the founder of TNCSS, has a booth there as well, so stop by and say hello and find out more about TNCSS, which is Tennessee Citizens for State Sovereignty. For Second Amendment issues and news about the upcoming Red Flag special session, go to TennesseeFirearms.com. Check out the numerous podcast interviews with different legislators. The Tennessee Firearms Association annual fundraiser is September 9th in Lebanon, Tennessee at the Wilson County Fairgrounds. The keynote speaker is Donald Trump Jr. Go to TennesseeFirearms.com and click on Annual Event to purchase your tickets. You do not have to be a member to attend. On the issue of the Red Flag session, the Republican SEC, which is the State Executive Committee, unanimously passed a resolution this past Saturday requesting that Governor Lee cancel his plans for a special session. The resolution was presented by Chris Morris of Giles County. Chris stressed the public safety concerns presented by radical leftists from across the country descending on Nashville and provided examples from the end of the last session. Morris said he's putting the state, he's putting legislators, meaning Lee, both the House and Senate in danger. They'll be the only state in a special session, and guess what? We're going to be inundated with those others for the crazies from other states. He said he was in the House gallery earlier this year as House Republicans expelled two lawmakers, I have no sound right now, as they staged an impromptu floor protest of state gun laws following the Covenant shooting. I don't know how many of y'all were up there. I was when they removed the lawmakers, and it was crazy. Being one of two people in the gallery with all those nuts around you, Morris said. And the problem is we as Republicans don't get off our do-nothing and quit leaning back on our elbows and do less and go up there and support these legislators. We should be the ones packing the House. We have the majority, but we don't show up. I just think this body, meaning the SEC, should issue a statement to the governor to stop and not formally call lawmakers back to Nashville. Committee member John Stanberry of Cleveland told the Times Free Press that legislation had an opportunity to pass the Order of Protection bill when they were in regular session and chose not to. So I personally do not know why he would call them back to do something they've already rejected, Stansbury said. They rejected it by choosing not to do it. Secondly, I think it paints a target on all the backs of the legislators. I think they're going to come up here and have to walk a gauntlet. And a lot of it will be out-of-state people. And so I think it puts an unreasonable strain not only on government, but their safety and security. No response yet from the Lee administration, but it is not expected that this will change his mind. I want to say a little more on that, the whole red flag session. You know, the governor, quite honestly, should be thrown out of the party. I mean, why do we have a Republican governor trying to pass a red flag law? This is the same guy who is all for prison reform and wants to give prisoners a second chance, give those who have been convicted of a crime a second chance, but is willing to infringe the rights and take the weapons of somebody that might do something wrong. So I really think the SEC should really consider throwing the governor out of the party. Not going to hold my breath, but that's what should happen. By the way, a little disclaimer on my commentary. My commentary is my commentary. Has nothing to do with whatever guest I may have on here. And so they're not responsible for anything I say. A second resolution, also by Morris, to give a vote of no confidence to Lieutenant Governor McNally over his embarrassing the state and party by his online shenanigans with a known homosexual, was prevented from going forward by SEC Chairman Scott Golden. Golden opposed speaking out against a fellow Republican. He did leave the door open to some sort of action in the future. Republicans of the low caliber like McNally need to be ran out of the party, as do those such as Golden that defend him. We constantly hear this story about Reagan's 11th commandment that you should not speak ill of a Republican. Well, if that Republican is not upholding Republican values, we need to get rid of them. And I think the R in McNally, behind McNally's name, is for reprobate and not Republican. This goes for all but 7 Republican state senators that backed McNally in a straw poll by McNally when his story first broke last spring. Also, on another note, positive note, just a reminder that WDXE, a radio station in Lawrenceburg, has 2 very conservative talk radio programs. The Kip Capley Show airs from 5 to 6 p.m. every Monday. Kip is a freshman state representative from that area that has proven to be a solid conservative so far. And on Wednesday nights from 5 to 6, the chair of the Lawrence County Republican Party, Brandon Taylor, and Secretary Lawrence Sutton host a show as well. You can listen to them at WDXE 95.3 or 105.3 FM and 1370 AM or at WDXE Talk Radio on YouTube.com. Both of these shows have great guests and the hosts have a truly conservative perspective on issues. It's great grassroots radio. Last but not least, if you want our state to step up and push back on the overreach and often unconstitutional federal government, visit tncss at weebly.com. Learn more about the nullification legislation we hope to get passed this session. There's no cost, it's informational site only, but we would like for you to click on the Substack tab to sign up. We need as many people as we can to show support for this effort. Thank you. If you have an announcement from a conservative organization you want to announce on this show, and send the information to tninformer.tv@gmail.com the Friday before the show. Now to our guest, Representative Rusty Grills. Rusty represents District 77, made up Dyer, Lake, and Obion counties. He's in his second full term, having completed part of a remaining term of Bill Sanderson. He has proven to be consistently conservative since he was first elected. He served as the county commissioner in Dyer County for 10 years. He is a farmer. He's married and has 2 children. Representative Grills, thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you, Dave, for having me on. Look forward to the conversation we're going to have, and maybe we'll solve some problems while we're at it.
Well, I'm sure we'll have some ideas.
Yeah.
First things first, red flag's the hottest thing going. So I'd like to hear, your thoughts on the session and
Sure.
predictions on what you think might happen.
First, I want to just say I represent Dyer, Lake, and Obion counties, and over the weekend we had a flooding event that took place there in Obion County, and it's come down through Dyer County now. But there's still some people displaced and water in their homes, and just lots of loss there. So just to keep those people in Obion and Dyer counties in your prayers. And I don't know, there's obviously places that people can donate, but that's not what we're on here for. But I do want to bring attention to that.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. You brought up the red flag. It's a no. Just a real quick, right out the gate answer, no. I'm a big NO on it. There's no chance of it passing. But there's so many different things that a red flag actually encompasses. And this idea that a neighbor could possibly have a grudge with, 2 neighbors can have a grudge against each other, and one neighbor says, I don't like this guy. I think he's a threat to our community. He goes out and he brings the threat. The cops go take his firearms until he's properly adjudicated, and he has to go to court to get his rights back. The guy's not been convicted of a crime, not been charged with a crime, just got a disgruntled neighbor. Those things like that. And they say, well, that's crazy. Yeah, it happens.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think the law that was brought, or the bill that was brought towards the end of session, was not quite like that. There was a lot more of an adjudication process that was going to take place, but that legislation is dead on arrival. NRA, TFA, any gun organization is against it, and every conservative that I know has issues with it as well.
Right. Well, I mean, I keep hearing that, it's not going to pass, but I'm really concerned because I know it only takes 50 votes to pass in the House, and
Sure.
we know all the Democrats will vote for it, and that's 20-some votes right there. And not all of the Republicans in our supermajority are as as reliable as you and some of the other people we've had on the show. So I'm not going to be happy until this thing is over and we've gotten by without any infringements being passed.
Well, after speaking with our House leadership numerous times, I'm convinced that the votes aren't there. I don't even know that the actual bill, if it were to come before the Civil Justice Subcommittee, which I'm on, you got people like Kip Capley, and I didn't even realize he had a radio show until you just said that a while ago. And Kip's a staunch conservative with a good record when it comes to Second Amendment. You got Gino Bolso, who's another freshman, staunch conservative with a pretty good Second Amendment record. Chris Todd, we don't have to, he's got his credentials.
Right.
Rick Eldridge from East Tennessee, staunch conservative. William Lambert, majority leader, he's not going to vote for it. Andy Farmer, he's not going to vote for it. Lowell Russell is not going to vote for it. I don't know of any other. I just don't see anybody on there voting for it. These guys have all been on record, gone on record, and been consistently on record of being against any type of a red flag law.
Well, good. So I hope you're right. What I would hope is that the governor changed his mind and not have this, but I'm not going to hold my breath on that one.
Well, let's go back to, there's only one Democrat on there, and there were actually two Democrats. Antonio Parkinson's and Bill Beck were on the civil subcommittee.
Right.
And Bill Beck he passed away earlier this summer. Tragic loss there for he and his family, but you hate to see anyone, have something like that happen to their family. But that left a spot there open on that capacity on that Civil Justice Subcommittee, and that election hasn't even taken place to fill that seat yet. So there is a void there. So there's only one Democrat on that committee. And I can't imagine that the speaker would come in and put another Democrat on there when that seat hasn't even been filled yet for a special session. That doesn't even make sense to me. I don't think that'd be unprecedented for him to do that.
No, not especially not if he plans on running for governor anytime soon, which we know he does. One of the issues too is that, towards the end of the last session, when we had all this hoorah with the Biden 3 that were wanting gun control then after the Covenant shooting, is we had a lot of people from out of state. And
sure.
So I've asked this question to the others, and I don't know if there's any updates or not, but is there anything going to be done to keep the people from out of state from filling up the committee rooms and the gallery in the Capitol? Because I understand we can't keep them off the grounds, I got it, but there's no reason for people from out of state to be inside of our Capitol, especially during a special session.
Well, there's fire codes that we have to adhere to. That would be regardless whether they're in state or out of state. But I don't think that we can have you can ID everyone to make sure that they're Tennesseans or valid Tennesseans to actually come into our Capitol. I think there'd be some constitutional issues there, and there's been conversations about who should we allow in, who should we not allow in, and I just I'm kind of fearful of ever wanting to have only let those that we want in and keep those that we don't want out. And I'm kind of like, I'm not fearful to go in there, just to be honest with you, Dave. I mean, leftists, their biggest tactic is to scare folks.
Right.
And, I think they're crazy in lots of respects.
Right.
But I'm not going to live in fear because some leftists may holler and shout and throw things or spit on me.
Right. They'll do that regardless of where they're from. That's not the issue. My point is, this is a state issue. This affects the citizens of Tennessee. People from other states should not be allowed in while this is going on. They shouldn't be allowed inside the Capitol. And they do check your ID when you come in, as far as I recall. So I don't know why they shouldn't be able to say, hey, you don't have a Tennessee license, you don't get in here.
And that's some of those conversations that are being had now. Had a conversation today about that. And towards the end of session last year, there was a little more strict settings on what you could bring in, and I think there were some different items, tear gas and things like that, or pepper spray that were confiscated there at the end of this last session.
Right.
So I mean, the state troopers have a job to do, and they're doing a good job at that. And we just need to go on. And if we're going to have a special session, let's go in, let's do the business, and let's get out of there.
Do you think will there be just a motion to adjourn, or do you think that will be prevented from happening?
Now, if we were to have a special session where the governor presented a red flag law and that's what it consisted of. I believe you would see a motion to adjourn, and it could get several votes. But I don't believe that you're going to see the governor bring a special session with a red flag law. I believe you're going to see the governor bring a special session that's going to have a lot of mental illness things that are going to help and affect mental illness and work in that realm. Maybe some increases on some of the criminal acts, some of the different things that we've worked on. We started working on towards the end of last session, and we've been working all summer with the different groups. I believe you'll see, all right, well, these are actually things that will help Tennesseans, and they won't trample on any Second Amendment rights or any other rights for that matter.
Right.
So, and I believe if that is the case, then that there may be a need for special session. There may be more of an appetite for a special session. Maybe not necessarily a need, but an appetite.
Right, because we could do that during a regular session as well. But
No.
and I understand the mental health concern, but I am a little bit concerned that becomes used as an excuse as well to take weapons from people. And it's still better than a flat out red flag law. But we currently have something in our code that allows you to have people, if they're adjudicated mentally unstable and a threat to themselves or others, we already have that process. So I don't know if they would streamline that or what, but I guess I'm a little bit concerned too that in this day and age when people can't even define what a woman is, I don't know if I trust my government to determine what is mentally ill and what's not mentally ill.
Well, that's a good point you make there, and I think that's very valid. We put together towards the end of session. You mentioned I was a farmer. I was on a tractor one day, and I got to thinking about how important some of these questions are that we have to deal with. So I met with we got all the guys and gals from the civil justice and the criminal justice subcommittee, several of them, and we come together and we met with the Department of Mental Health, and we tried to learn as much as we could. And we spent about an hour and 45 minutes, 2 hours one day, and we were just inundated with information about some of the things that the mental health community is dealing with, and how they're overworked, and how it seems like a lot of the places are underfunded, and the insurance rates, they're not being reimbursed at equitable rates. So they can actually keep their doors open. Representative Capley, he brought up that if you take someone and they need some mental intervention, their police department has to drive 2 hours just to get that person the help that they need. So that's not just that's down in Lawrenceburg.
Right.
Well, that's in Lawrenceburg. That's across the state in other places, and not every place has a mental intervention or mental illness intervention center that can get them the help they need when they need it. Because you can take every gun away from any person in the world, and up in Sumner County, where Leader Lambert lives, there was a guy who went in and killed 6, 7, 8 people with an axe. Mm-hmm. You could have taken every gun away, and that guy still had the ability to harm that family because he had an illness. Sin is ultimately the illness.
Right.
We wouldn't, but at the same time, the guy needed help, or he may have just been evil. I don't know.
Yeah.
But mental illness causes people to do crazy things. And if you can't just take the gun away, you have to help them in the place that they're in and get them the help they need, so they become more productive citizens and not criminals.
Right. You have a very pro Second Amendment record, and you sponsored this past session HB 1005, which would have made our state certainly more compliant with the Bruin Supreme Court decision last year. You want to talk a little bit about that bill, and do you see it coming back next year?
Well, we were making, Chairman Chris Todd and I worked side by side on this, and we served on the same committee, and we kind of carried it through together, and I appreciate his efforts. I don't want to totally, he and I mean, it's good to have friends there that have your back, and you can work together. We tried our best to get that moving, and we were moving, and we had pretty good headwind, or not a pretty good headwind, but a pretty good backwind, and or tailwind, and we were really moving. And the covenant happened,
right?
And we just felt like it was best to just set that to the side and put it under the shade tree, if you will. It's not dead by any stretch. We just didn't move it forward at that point because there was a lot of emotion there, and realizing where we were.
Well, the
And
Senate was no help either, right? The Senate.
Well, the Senate wasn't as much help we would like for him to have been, but we had a good sponsor in the Senate, and maybe not exactly what we wanted, but we had two bills, and the Senate was going with one, and we were going with one, and we would have probably got to the point down towards the end where we'd have had to go to a conference committee most likely, and we would have had to see what we could come up with there.
Right. Yeah, as I understood it, the Senate sponsor did everything he could, but it was in the one of the committees, there was another senator who basically, I guess, put kind of a poison pill amendment on it and pretty much undercut it or gutted it out. But hopefully, since it's still alive, it could come back next year then, right?
That's right. And that bill actually, it did several things. It changed handgun to firearm throughout the code. So the constitutional carry would have been firearm and not just handgun.
Right.
Moved from those who are allowed to carry from 21 down to 18, which works with the way I believe we had a court case earlier this year that we won. Those, when I say we, those of us on the Second Amendment side won against the state. Jonathan Scrimetti conceded as the Attorney General right after he came in that we were out of compliance. So we actually made some headways there. And I want to give a plug out to Jonathan Scrimetti as a Tennessee Attorney General. He is fantastic in my opinion. I'm grateful that he's there in that position. And he seems to really be an active supporter of those rights that were given to us by our founding.
Yeah. Well, he's certainly an improvement over the guy we had before. I mean, of course, Slattery was not much of an AG, but I've heard good things about Scrimetti, especially in relation to the Second Amendment. I guess my only question would be is, when he basically had to agree that, all right, we cannot continue to discriminate against 18 and 20-year-olds. That was part of the Bruin decision. I don't know why our state hasn't implemented all of the Bruin decision. It just seems like they're overall dragging their feet instead of just saying, okay, Bruin says this is what the Second Amendment now means according to the court. And it irritates me that they just haven't implemented all of it. You would think that's what they would do. That's what they do on every other Supreme Court decision. So,
well, it seems that I believe there's a group that has a couple of lawsuits going. I believe one of them's in Gibson County, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
To do with the parks and things like that Bruin is going to have a huge effect on. I can't remember the rest of them off the top of my head, but I know that there's two or three others that are going on.
Right.
And we're going to have looks like we're going to have small bites of the apple to finally get the state in compliance. But we're doing what we can there in the House and the legislature to try to move Tennessee in the right direction. We did meet some headwinds though from the administration, and the Department of Safety was not. They just don't see they do not see things the same way I do, or the Constitution, in my opinion. I believe that I have an oath to keep, and that is to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States and of Tennessee, not to go out and try to limit the individual's rights that God gave them.
Absolutely.
And some in other parts of the government feel that it's their job to be the arbiter of who is and who isn't. And I just don't feel that that's necessary. If you're not a criminal, you have every right that God gave you, and Tennessee is here to protect those rights, not to regulate them.
Absolutely. And I don't think there's anything in the charter of the Tennessee Department of Safety that says that they're supposed to tell the legislature what they are philosophically opposed to. So hopefully somebody will get them in line.
I think you've probably seen some of those hearings where we had some conversations along those same lines. Yeah. And that was a fun day. Here's the deal. Reasonable people can disagree, but at the end of the day, our freedoms and our foundation are based and our fundamental rights are based in the Constitution. And once we start tearing that apart, then it's just, okay, well, you're not interested in this or you're not interested in that. And next thing you know, the whole thing crumbles because you start pulling it apart, picking it apart. And it's kind of like the Bible. You can't just take one verse out of context. You have to use the whole counsel because it's fitly joined together. Right. And I believe that's the way the Constitution is. I don't necessarily believe that the Constitution was inspired, but I believe there was divine intervention.
Oh, absolutely. I don't have any doubt in my mind. I think we wouldn't have this country if it wasn't for divine intervention, and I don't think we'll get it back unless we have divine intervention and state intervention at some point.
Oh,
We'll get to that a little bit later.
yeah.
Currently in Tennessee, violent youth offenders are able to have their record expunged when they turn 18. And is that something you think needs to change?
Well, in these conversations that we've had, the different meetings we've had this summer, and we've had these meetings, it's not like they're just backdoor meetings. These are just informational meetings that we just try to educate ourselves on and have conversations with different members and bring people in and have educational events, if you will, to try to understand everything that goes on. And through those, we found some instances where kids 12 or 14, 15, 16, 17 years old that commit a crime, that if that 15-year-old commits a crime and a 20-year-old commit a crime, that 20-year-old would have to live with the rest of their life. But that 15-year-old, when they turn 18, it's like they get it and put it on a dry erase board. And when you turn 18, they hand you an eraser and say, here, go have fun. And they wipe it off and you can start over. Well, gang members and gangs have started to take notice of this. Right. And they're not prosecuting those individuals. And it's just like Mayor Strickland said something in Memphis, and I didn't hear it, but I heard it quoted. He said that kid that steals a gun at 16, carjacks a car at 20, is a murderer at 24. Yep. And it's something to that nature, and it's a progression. So lax on crime, loose on crime, I don't know that that's necessarily the right way to go. Maybe we ought to be a little tougher on crime. And I mean, I've said it in Sunday school class before. We're either directing boys or correcting men. And maybe that's what we need to be. Maybe that's the way our judicial system needs to be a little more in tune with, directing boys instead of having to correct men.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we started tonight, we were actually talking a little bit, and you talked a minute ago about our rights and not losing our rights. And back during COVID, I think everybody lost rights to some degree. Sure. But there was a special session in October of 21 in reference to this. And there was something that you mentioned in terms of, for instance, during the COVID lockdowns, there were churches that were not allowed, or I won't say in Tennessee they were not allowed, but they were certainly discouraged from meeting. And you brought some legislation up to deal with that during that session. Can you talk about that a little bit? Yeah,
and it actually wasn't special session. It was actually before that, because anytime government, I mean, remember Rahm Emanuel, that Barack Obama's chief advisor, or maybe he's the chief of staff, I remember, but he used that common phrase, never let an opportunity go to waste. Yeah. Never. So whenever government has an opportunity to take your rights and freedoms away, you can bet your dollar they're going to. And I saw that I thought that religious freedom was at the forefront of our Constitution and the forefront of our founding. And our governor, back in 2001, 2002, 3, the General Assembly gave the governor ultimately unlimited power in the time of an emergency. Right. And I had the bill that we ran, and we were successful with passing it, that limits the governor. He can't shut a church down. And we just pretty much recodified what the United States Constitution guarantees every individual, that you have a right to assemble, you have a right to practice your religion as you see fit. And we passed that here in Tennessee and took that right back and gave it to the people, and took it away from the Emergency Powers Act that was given. And I think that needs to be looked at as well. That's a really gross overreach.
Yeah, there was a lot of overreach at all levels.
Yeah, and when you go off to other places and the people realize that you live in Tennessee, and they're like, holy smokes, it must be nice to live in Tennessee where you have the freedoms that you have, the low taxes that you have. And sometimes we take it for granted. But just because we live in Tennessee doesn't mean that everything we do in Tennessee is right. So we've got to make sure that we do not just take for granted that because someone has an R by their name or D by their name that they're bad. I don't believe there's any. I believe there's more. I believe there's better Republicans. There's more good Republicans than there is good Democrats. I will say that. But we just can't. We can't just stick our head in the sand and say, okay, well, they're Republicans, so it's got to be a good idea. We've got to means test these things and these ideas, and they've got to be put through the fire. And you got to challenge everything. because if you don't, you'll wind up doing things that's wrong. And I'm grateful that Tennessee didn't go. That we're one of the last states to shut down. I don't think we should have ever shut down.
Right.
I think the market should be the place where those decisions are made. And if you feel comfortable going in, go in. If you don't feel comfortable, stay home. Wear your mask. I don't care. It's fine. Wear your mask as much as you want. I don't care if you're going to wear it today, as hot as it is. But that's your business. But I just don't think government has a place to start coming into individuals' homes and businesses and start telling them how to run everything. And another thing there, Dave, this is one of those things that just eat me up. I had the bill that year, seeing what was happening. I'm not saying I'm some prophet, don't get me wrong, but I know if you're involved in politics for any length of time, you always know that government has the tendency to go further than it should.
Right.
And I carried the bill that, and I didn't get anywhere with it, but it said that if you as a condition of employment, you couldn't mandate a vaccine as a COVID vaccine as a condition of employment. Well, that got about as far as the end of my nose. But the fact of the matter is, looking back, it was the right position. You know why? Because it gave the right back to the individual.
Right.
And Article 1, Section 26 of the Tennessee Constitution guarantees every Tennessean the right of conscience. And we got to, as a government, every time we get a chance, protect those rights. And maybe I try to do a good job at it. Sometimes I'm sure I fell miserably. But the goal in everything that we do has got to be means tested by that Constitution, put through the fire, put through those tests, and criticize to the utmost before you vote and pass something.
Well, you're right that they definitely need to look at that Emergency Powers Act again, because if you look at our state constitution, and I know you know this, Article 1 is the Declaration of Rights. That's, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, our Second Amendment equivalent, which is actually Section 26. Pretty much all the rights that we have in the federal Constitution.
Article 1, Section 26 there a while ago, didn't I? I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, Section 26 is the right to keep and bear arms in Tennessee, but it's all under the Declaration of Rights. And so it lists these right up front. It also says that, the concept of non-resistance is slavish and absurd, basically meaning you need to speak up for your rights and you need to instruct your elected officials. But later on in the Constitution, in the state constitution, it says in Article 11, Section 16, it says that the Declaration of Rights prefixed to this Constitution is not to be violated under any pretext whatever. Doesn't matter. No emergency situation. There's nothing that justifies violating the Constitution. And so there's no excuse for it. And the other thing is, that means that law that was passed, it was unconstitutional when it was passed. If you gave emergency powers to anybody, you violated the Constitution right there. The other thing is that, I don't know if do you know who the Senate sponsor of those emergency powers were? You know who the Senate sponsor was?
Back in 2002, 3?
Yeah.
They're not.
It was McNally.
Was it?
Yeah, just coincidental, but I just thought I'd bring that up. Anyway, so I'm glad that you see the threat there, and I'm sure that you'll do all you can in the future to fix that. Anything else that you want to say on the emergency powers issue?
I did want to clarify. I said Article 1, Section 26. I know that's the Second Amendment part, but Article 1, Section 3 was referring to about the right of conscience and how important that is, that an individual has that right to do what they want and what they feel is necessary for themselves. And I just want to make sure that I don't get misquoted by some,
some sharpshooter.
Some leftists out there that go around and say, see, he doesn't even know what he's talking about. He doesn't. So.
Yeah, I got you. I understand. Another problem that we're hearing about more these days, and we know it happens in Tennessee as well. You sponsored House Bill 0017, which is in reference to human trafficking in Tennessee. How bad is the problem in Tennessee, and is there other trafficking-related legislation that you intend to file?
Yes, and HB 1017 was we were working on some legislation, and the filing deadline come up on us, and we had a short time to get it together with what we needed. So we just made a huge caption, thought we had everything that we needed, and what we were trying to do was give our Attorney General, the AG, some authority to do some investigatory work and using the TBI, because the problem is it takes so many men and the manpower hours to actually build a case on some of these traffickers, and that's such a it's heartbreaking, to be honest with you, Dave. Just some of the stories. I had supper with AG Scrimeti a few weeks ago, and we were talking about some of the things that he encountered when he was in Memphis as a prosecutor. And I have a 12-year-old daughter, and these heartless, soulless, black hole filled individual. I mean, I don't even know how they can sleep at night. And some of the atrocities they would put these young girls through, as if that's okay. And it's not just kids that are here in Tennessee. These are kids that they're bringing across the border, and they're thinking that they're going to get a new life and freedom, but they're actually been brought up here to become a commodity that they're trading on the black market and use over and over and over again, like a utensil at a restaurant. And it seems like the leftist, progressive liberals in our political systems are perfectly cool with that. And yet they want to come after your Second Amendment rights while they want to protect the border, where they're letting people just flood over here. And this is a fact. This is not something that's just hyperbole. I don't understand how they can even rationalize that this is okay. And I know I've probably gone places there I shouldn't even go. But there is such a problem with that. And my efforts and our efforts, working with the Mission America Foundation, they have done tremendous work going and getting these girls and these individuals that have been sold into this lifestyle. And some people choose this lifestyle because they think that's the only way out of the poverty that they're in, from whatever country that they're in. So kudos to those people that go and they pull those young ladies and family members out of that lifestyle. But here in Tennessee, we need to do everything we can to help crack down on that trafficking, and do what we can to be a bright spot Tennessee when it comes to those types of crimes.
Absolutely. Well, and of course, the Biden administration has made it worse with their whole open borders deal. But, here in Tennessee, we're not responsible for the border.
But don't worry. Biden has a full freezer full of ice cream. He got every flavor you could want upstairs. And that's how out of touch this administration is. He can talk about ice cream when there are people that are being traded like commodity, like I said, a utensil at a restaurant over and over again every night. And he's cool with that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, no, I mean, it's just flat out evil. There's no excuse for it, no excuse for what the Biden administration is allowed to happen. But we know that. And so our state needs to do everything it can to demagnetize our state. Demagnetize it from traffickers and just demagnetize it from illegals altogether. As long as we are open for business here in Tennessee to cater to illegals, we're adding to that problem. We're not responsible for the border, but anything we do here that magnetizes traffic here, that's our fault. Now, and on that note, and granted, you voted the right way on the legislation I'm getting ready to bring up, but the year before last, the so-called workforce expansion bill, which gives professional license to illegal aliens, that was passed in our Republican supermajority. Well, by the way, the House sponsor was a Democrat. So those kind of things we need to cut out, which you voted the right way. You voted against that, and I appreciate that. But we need to make sure that we are not, as a state, in any way, shape, or form, adding to the problem that the Biden administration is creating.
I remember that vote, and that's a no-brainer for someone like me, but there were several people that were conflicted about it, and you just look at it. When you have a Democrat that's carrying a bill like this,
tells you all you need to know.
Tells you all you need to know.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'll just go on record right here, right now. I do not believe that there's 1 ounce of virtue in liberalism, none whatsoever.
No, there isn't.
And to think that there is in some way, shape, form, or fashion, there may be liberals that are good folks, but liberalism has no virtue.
Yeah, the ideology. Yeah.
The ideology in itself is destructive. It does not produce anything. It takes, it destroys, it damages. It just does not do anything that's conducive to progress, in my opinion.
Well, and what
But
we're really dealing with now is Marxism. For years we've said liberalism, but they've sped past that. They're just full-fledged Marxists now. The left it's run by Marxists.
you're absolutely correct. And but back on that bill you just brought up, though, I remember there were several people, and I remember talking to several of them that they were bringing up the DACA and how the DACA immigrants, that Obama had made legal by executive order, or however that went now. But that they were not legal. They were not here legally. Just
No.
the president doesn't have the ability by executive order to deem someone here legally by executive order.
Right. Well, he even said that. He never said that he made them legal. He said that we're going to leave them here. We're going to let them come anyway.
Right.
He even admitted that they weren't legal. And then the bad thing is that a year before that bill was passed, there was a federal judge that said they are not legal. And then in 22, we passed this, and then the fall of 22, another federal appeals court upheld it that, hey, these DACA kids are not here legal. They do not have a legal status.
Right.
So
Well,
that's something that needs to be repealed. Hopefully that will get repealed this upcoming session.
I would vote for the repeal on that. But there's here at the state, there's several things. I mean, there's lots of ideas, but I don't know what we could do just that would actually clamp down and prevent the crisis at the border. And I was at the border earlier this year, 5 weeks ago or so, and we were met down there with one of the former Border Patrol agents, and he said the last year of President Trump, he was in the Yuma sector. I believe he said it was 8,800 people come across the border that year. 8,800 people. He retired in 2022. Just take a guess at how many there, Dave.
There's a few million now, I'm pretty sure, they got across.
But that section right there went from 8,800 to 316,000 in 2 years. Because when President Trump left office, there was a will to stop it.
Right.
President Biden has no will. He has no. It doesn't bother him. There were questions brought up while we were down there, and it was. He even said something to the effect of, "There's a lot of Chinese young men that are coming over that they have seemed to be trained in guerrilla warfare." And I don't be conspiratorial, but there was something there, something of that effect. It seemed like they were militant like. And I don't know what, I'm not trying to stir up something or start something, but that's what one of the Border Patrol agents brought to our attention, and he was in a position to know what was going on.
Yeah.
So I thought it was kind of sad and alarming at the same time that those things were taking place at our southern border.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're Chinese. They're military-age Chinese. They're Chinese nationalists possibly. And in any event, we have people from all across the world coming here, and a lot of them are military-age men, whether they're Chinese, Russian, who knows what. I mean, the borders are wide open. On one hand, they tell us how dangerous the world is, and then they got the border wide open. So it's just insane. But to me, that's why it's all that much more important. Even though our state cannot secure the border, they know that while this administration is in power, that the flow's not going to stop. So that's why we have to be that much more determined in our state to, okay, let's do anything we can to keep them from coming here. Let's be as unwelcoming as we can. If they're going to go to other states, they go to other states. We want to keep them, we want them to not even want to come to Tennessee. That's how we should think, in my opinion. So.
And I understand where you're coming from, but let's just look at it this way. If you have something to contribute to Tennessee, we want you here. And that's the reason we need really wide, really tall fences and really wide gates.
Yeah, but you're talking legal immigration versus illegal.
I'm talking so legal that you cross every T, you dot every I, and you do things right. Because why? We're a nation of laws. And if we're not a nation of laws, then we're a lawless nation.
Yep.
So it's imperative that we do things right. Because we have character, we have class, and we want to do things right. And I just think we get back to that. Now, because I mean, there's some things that I have thrown around in the back of my head, and like, is this a good idea? Is this something we could do? Something we shouldn't do? Maybe we look into. So I'm considering trying to create a a license for those who would like to be. So if you want to come into the country, you have to have a sponsor. So if you want to be a sponsor of someone, you have to have a license with the Tennessee Department of Homeland Security. So we would actually know who's coming in here and you're sponsoring, something of that nature. And I want to create more government, but there's some, I'm just throwing around some ideas. And if you've got any ideas, I'll be happy to hear those.
Yeah, I don't. The thing is, there's no way to vet anybody right now because the administration has thrown the gates open. So even if you got if you got Tennessee State Department of Security, Homeland Security involved, they're still just going to be taking the word of the federal government, which is worthless right now. So I mean, I don't know that we can do anything with this current situation and be comfortable about who we're bringing over here.
But we would at least know how many we had in Tennessee and have an idea of those that are in Tennessee. Now, we don't know if we're getting a bus in every night or if we're getting a plane load landing. We have no idea. Yeah, right. When I was down at the border, we went to one of the places of refuge there. They would take the people that were coming across the border. And when I left to fly back home, I have I don't know if it's a gift or what, maybe a curse, but I noticed everything. And I noticed that there was a guy that was at Fort Smith, or Fort Dallas, Fort Worth, that I saw in that, Catholic Charities holding facility that they had released, and he was at the airport with me. I don't know where he was from, but he wasn't working. I can assure you that he wasn't moving. And he come up and he actually he was trying to find a place. He couldn't speak any English. But he was trying to find his gate. Right. Well, he come across the border. Everyone come across the borders in that facility unless you were working there.
Right.
And he was given a ticket to fly wherever he wanted to. We'd have no idea if he's coming to Tennessee, or if he's in Boston, or if he's in Seattle.
Yeah. Well,
that's a failure of the federal government once again.
Yeah, I'd like to see buses in Tennessee, so whenever they do show up here, we just bus them up north somewhere. Send them to D.C., send them to New York, send them to Colorado. Just send them out of Tennessee when they get here. That's my thought.
You got to give Greg Abbott and Governor DeSantis some credit, because they did a good job of exposing the hypocrisy of liberals.
Absolutely.
And when they had them coming into their own backyard, it was a different story. Just like Nancy Pelosi, how dare we build a wall? Do not come across my fence.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. What do you think is one of the single biggest factors in how bad our society has become? And why is the government involved in everything?
Well, I believe personally that a strong family produces strong kids, which produces strong communities, which produces strong states, and strong states produce a strong country. And it's a domino effect. And what produces a strong family? A strong mother and a strong father raising their kids together. And I believe that's what we're missing. The government has come in and become the sole provider in so many instances. In so many communities, you see that it's just been destructive. When government comes in and gets involved in something, I've never seen anything where government actually got involved, accomplished what they wanted to accomplish, got out, and things actually cost what they were supposed to cost. And if you can find those, I'd be happy to see that. Yeah. But the family is such an important part. I mean, that's the way God made man. Yep. Made man and woman for each other, to procreate, to have children, and to replenish the earth, is what the Bible says in Genesis. So we're to go out and we're to have children, and we're to raise them to serve God and to live and realize that one day they will have to stand before God. So it's their job to do things right, and how and honor God in the way that they live. And because they realize that there's a higher power, there's morality in this world. And because there's morality in this world, there's in the business realm, you don't have to have blood contracts, because people do what's right because they're honest, they have integrity, and they know that they will answer to a God. And now that government has become the sole provider to so many people, government has become their God. Yeah. Government is depend on. And when people depend on government gets power from people depending on them. So what do? You give them more, and then you create a bigger entitlement society. And now you have the God of government. How dare you talk against the God of government? How dare you speak out against the God of government? And that's what we're lacking. That's what we're missing. So a strong father is the most important thing in a family, and men need to step up and be stronger fathers. A strong father will take care of numerous issues. I bet Dr. Meg Meeker wrote a book, Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters. And this is how important a father is to a young girl. In those adolescent years, she's 70-something% less likely to become promiscuous in those adolescent years if she's got a daddy in her life that hugs her and loves on her and meets the needs she has. Well, there's communities out there that are struggling because there's 70% of the kids born in those communities are born to single parents.
Yep.
That's a problem, Dave. And we know that if you're born in a single parent home, the likelihood of you living in perpetual poverty is just astronomical versus those who are born into a family that have a mom and a dad that live there, love each other and worship each other and discipline with each other and are there for each other.
Yeah.
So,
but what does the government subsidize? The government subsidizes those single families, those single mother families, and they discourage the traditional family.
You subsidize, you incentivize.
Yeah.
And that is a problem. So if you have a strong daddy, you have a strong mama, you have a strong family, you take care of education issues, you take care of crime issues, you take care of poverty issues, and then all of these other problems are an offspring of a fatherless home or a split home. Right. So there's been lots of kids that have been raised in single parent homes that have done well. I don't want to discredit any of them, but the statistical data says a stronger home, a better result. Okay. And this is probably one of my most passionate topics because I know what it's like to have a good mom and a good dad, and that's an emotional. It's very emotional to me because I had that. And not every person that I come in contact with on a daily basis had that ability. So I don't know what it's like to be raised in a single parent home, but my heart goes out to those people. And I just commend those people that try and go the extra mile and go above and beyond and sacrifice to raise those kids and do the best they can. But as a government, it's not our responsibility as a government to incentivize the destruction of the family.
Yeah. But that's what they've done for about 50, 60 years now. And, that's one of the problems in the schools is you have so many of these kids from dysfunctional families with, only one parent. And maybe that parent's addicted to something. So that's a problem in the schools. It's a problem. I saw it a lot when I was in the military because we would get these kids from dysfunctional families or, single parent families. And you could tell the difference in a kid that you got that came from that situation versus somebody who came from a two-parent home where there was some discipline in the person and the child was taken care of while they were growing up. You could tell a big difference in the military. You can tell it everywhere. It does matter. It definitely matters.
Well, discipline does not mean that you're getting a whooping every day. It means that you're teaching character, right. and that you're teaching some self-control. And you're instilling values into an individual. Discipline, and so often we hear the word discipline and we automatically think that someone's getting their backhand all the time. That's not it all. That's not it at all. Discipline is realizing that there are certain boundaries that you have and knowing when to stop and when to press on. That's what discipline is.
So, and I know we don't want to obviously we don't want to create more laws, but what do you see as a legislator that maybe in some cases the state needs to get uninvolved with?
Ooh, that's a question it's a long list of things.
I should ask you that at the beginning instead of the end.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. At the end of the day, personal responsibility in every area of life today is probably one of the most important things that we could encourage. And anytime that we can encourage an individual, and I don't want to use the word subsidize, but we just need to incentivize people to be responsible for themselves. And I don't know that that's something government can do. I think our government is a product of our society. And whatever society is okay with, it seems like our government goes a little further.
Yeah, well, they feed on each other, and rather than incentivize, things maybe that our government could stop incentivizing. I'm not talking about creating another program. I'm talking about, okay, here's something that we're doing that's encouraging the bad behavior, encouraging the bad traits. Maybe we need to stop doing that as a government.
Well, back during the COVID, over and over again, people there were different businesses in my district that were needing help, but yet they couldn't get the help they needed because they were able to draw unemployment. All they had to do was say they were fearful to go to work because of COVID. Yeah. So they just go and stay home. And then the government was saying, all right, we're going to give you this amount of money, plus the federal government is going to give you this. Well, incentivize people to not go to work because they can make more money staying at home, yep, doing nothing and watching, The Price is Right. Then they could go into work every day.
Yeah, the price is right to sit home on your butt. That's what we've created with our government.
And it creates an entitlement mentality, and that's something that we ought to be cognizant of to never do again. And obviously that wasn't a conservative or Republican plan. That was the Biden administration did that, unfortunately, but we still have to live with the ramifications of bad decisions, even if they are in charge.
Right. Well, and we want to try not to make it worse at the state level.
That's correct. I know, I think it was Bill Clinton back in the 90s when he was president, and Newt Gingrich, they tried to put people back to work and get them off of the welfare roll. Right. And I believe there was some success in that. And then I can't remember exactly what happened, but that kind of fell apart. But I think that's a step in the right direction. I think that's something we ought to do. Limits on the amount of time that a person could actually draw those type of payments. That seems reasonable. Yeah. You ought to be able to find a job and support yourself. Here in my town that I live in, Dyer Lake in Obion County, if somebody wanted a job, or 150 somebody's wanted a job, they could email my office tomorrow. And by the end of the week, we could have everybody a job, or at least an interview, most likely, if they meet the. And I'm not talking about a job where you could just get by with. I'm talking about a breadwinning job, a job that would provide a good home, a good living, and go out to eat on the weekends if you know how to manage your money.
Right.
So we have the jobs out there. We have we just need the people who are willing to go get a job.
Yeah, and that actually ties back a little bit to the lack of work ethic and fairness does tie back to one of the problems we have with the whole illegal aliens, because the businesses want cheap labor. Not all of them, but a lot of them, they want cheap labor. So they're okay with the illegals. But the other part of that is, in some cases, that's all they can get. Now, that's not a justification for me. People are still here illegal, and small businesses do not have a constitutional right to cheap labor, certainly not cheap illegal labor. But the lack of work ethic in much of our country today, that feeds that problem of, okay, can't get you guys to do it. These guys over here said they'll do it. I don't care if they're illegal. Still wrong, but that's part of the problem, in my opinion.
I was just being a Representative Hurt, which he has some of Obion County. We were up at one of the industry in Obion County earlier last week, and they were talking about there is a cutoff, and it's in that late 30s, early 40s, mainly the late 30s, though, that there's a different mentality of how they approach a job, yeah, than there is in those that are older than that. And now they love someone that's in their late 50s that want to come in and get a job because they'll show up and they'll be there, and they realize they have a responsibility to be there. And too often, they said so many of them will just show up and they have something going on the weekend, and like if they can't get off, they'll just quit. Really? You're going to quit your job because you don't want to miss an event with your sweetheart or whomever it may be? Yeah. That's just not a generation, yeah. World War II and the Korean, the Vietnam era. Those individuals that were raised in that time and grew up in that time, they knew what it was like to work. Absolutely. And we have it so good now that we've become soft and we've become accustomed to being lazy. Yeah. Hey, me too. I mean, in so many ways. My dad wasn't exactly one who let us be lazy. He could always find us a job.
Well, you're a farmer. You can't be too lazy.
I can't be too lazy, and I can't go very far without a Band-Aid in my pocket. I'm always busting up.
Well, hey, I appreciate you coming on the show. Enjoyed it. Love to have you back sometime.
I'll look forward to it. Look forward to it.
I enjoyed it. It was a really good show. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. If you like the show, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Join us next week when our guest will be Representative Monty Fritz. See you next week. Good night. Hey, thanks, man. I enjoyed it.